Hello and welcome to College Admissions with Mark and Anna. Each week we talk about different college admissions topics and answer those tough questions you may be dealing with concerning getting into the college of your choice. We know how stressful this process can be, so each episode we try to make it easier to navigate. Now, here are your hosts, Anna Wren and Mark Hofer.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the College Admissions Podcast with your hosts, Anna Wren and
Mark Hofer.
And we are so excited because we have a special guest today. We have Lynne Peeples, who is a science journalist, speaker, and the author of The Inner Clock. Welcome, Lynne.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited. So tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write your book.
Yeah, I think the origin really goes back to high school for me. Growing up in Seattle, we are at a high latitude with massive day length changes throughout the year. So I just remember winters being really dark. I remember my high school starting really early. I think it was 7:25 back in the day, which is not too uncommon still today. And I remember not seeing daylight for a good portion of the weeks of the year because I'd go to school in the dark. I would get out of basketball practice or whatever after school and it would be dark. And I remember really struggling and that seasonal affective disorder. And now looking back, I feel I suffered through the months of the year growing up. But it wasn't until really the last several years I started making connections as circadian science has really grown. We're understanding a lot more about these inner clocks in our bodies and how they drive our sleep and so many other things. And what really tipped me off is actually a trip to the locker room of the Seattle Mariners hometown baseball team. They had put in some new lighting in the locker room to help the players. It was supposed to, they're shining this bright, more blue wavelength light before games to help the players energize. And then after the game, having more dim orange light, which was to help the players calm down and sleep. So all these kind of technologies to manipulate and help support our rhythms and our sleep, have been coming out. And I was intrigued. So that's really, how I started going down this path.
So, Lynne, one of the things I think in science, as soon as you start asking questions, if you're asking good questions, you start uncovering more questions. And when I read your book, it's almost like you went in looking for circadian rhythms and discovering what kind of information is developed over time. But you actually found that there are many more layers. And you mentioned in the book, you talk about circadian rhythms and circadian clocks, but then you go into chronotypes. And then you start uncovering different things, everything from how food influences our rhythms and all of those things. And you just mentioned all of the other rhythms in our body. And I'm curious, we're going to be talking about sleep and different things that students can apply to their study times and when they're most effective. But when you were doing your research into this book, what were some of those other layers of clocks that we have internally that are part of that bigger picture?
Oh, absolutely. That's a good question. And it's true. I mean, I started off probably as a lot of us really thinking about circadian rhythms being linked to sleep and kind of, that's it. But no, really, they, as you said, they drive pretty much every aspect of our physiology. So as I learned, essentially every cell in our bodies has a clock. There's trillions of them then, since we have trillions of clocks in our bodies. And they're all, trying to coordinate all the activities that our body does throughout the day and night to make sure that it's doing those activities at the right times. Because our bodies, they can't be doing all the things at all the times of day, right? We have, we're trying to digest food and metabolize food. Our immune system's trying to, block out those invading viruses that want to make us sick. Our muscles want to be primed to be fastest or strongest at certain times of day, maybe for an athletic competition. So all these things, the body can't be ready to do them at all times because we don't have the energy for that. That would not be an efficient system. So we evolved to kind of allocate these activities for different times of day. So then if that gets thrown off, or we do, eat at certain times or perform different things at different times of day, then our body is ready to do them we're not going to be setting ourselves up for success. We might not be setting ourselves up to be our healthiest. So that's one of the really most important layers that I really uncovered is just how critical it is to be considering our circadian rhythms to help optimize our entire body and our productivity and performance.
So that brings up a question that I get a lot in working with students is like, for example, you mentioned you'd have to start school at like 7 something, right?
Yeah.
And where I am, like there are some schools that have actually pushed back the start time for school because of, this kind of research and stuff. Is that something more schools should adopt? Should it not only just be for school, but like, for example, our students take the SATs on the weekends, right? And so like, they're always like, I get this, I don't know if Mark, you get it, but hey, Anna, I did so much better on my practice test that I practiced for in the afternoon or evening, but like, it was just so much different when I did the real one in the morning. So should we, I don't know, are those adjustments good and should more of that happen?
Yes and yes. Science. So yes, absolutely. I mean, as the science shows us, when we hit adolescence, maybe 13-ish years old, our body goes through many changes, but one of them is our circadian rhythms drift later. So not a shock to probably any listener out there, but a teen is more likely to want to stay up later and get up later. And it's not just a behavioral phenomenon. I mean, that's part of it. It's, social structures, screens, all these things are exacerbating that. But there is internal programming that is driving their biology to stay up later. So yeah, when we have elementary schools, on average starting later and then middle and high school starting earlier, that's like backwards biologically. And there is a trend, as you alluded to, of districts recognizing the science and trying to reverse that. So Seattle Public Schools, for example, several years ago did make that change where the middle and high schools on the whole, I don't think it's across the board, but they're starting later now and elementary schools are starting earlier. So that does line up better with biology. And then, there's all these other aspects that maybe we should be considering more. And I talk about in my book, SAT start times. If they're also really early in the morning, that's not setting students up for success. So, if their sleep is getting curtailed, they're also just not, taking the test at their optimal performance when their brain is online. They're not, again, being set up for success. So, absolutely. I think this is something that we should be talking more about, thinking about.
Yeah, Lynn, one of the things as you start reading your book, it gets compounding complexity in that one influences the other. And one of those components about start time of schools, of tests, is you mentioned and you bring up chronotypes.
Yeah.
And some people, they love the morning. They're best in the morning. Other people, no, thank you. So I've actually seen where it's been suggested that there are 2 start times for high school, in that one starts in the morning and one that starts in the afternoon. And basically you have 2 shifts where you're using the school facility as much as possible as well. But for those teens, how can they identify, whether they are a lark or a night owl? What are some of the methods, other than all of them are going to say, I hate getting up in the morning, but that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, you're right, layers of complexity here. So we have the underlying biological changes we go throughout our lives. From the moment we're born till we get older, our chronotype is naturally kind of shifting. But then across the population, we all have a different chronotype. And that is the, more scientific-y term for the morning lark versus the night owl versus everything in between. So it's really kind of this normal curve or this spectrum of different chronotypes. And to really know where you fall on that, I mean, I think some of us probably have some intuition as to what, where we trend, but it can be deceiving sometimes because of social structures and our schedules. We may not really understand what our body wants to do because we're so used to getting up with an alarm clock and everything else. But to really pinpoint it, I guess, I'd probably say for the students out there, summertime or any vacation, winter break or something would be a good time to do some experiments on yourself and just try to let your body decide when you're going to bed, when you're getting up. Try to avoid, do those things I'm sure you've heard, try to avoid too much screen time at night, because that blue light is altering your natural programming. It's altering when your melatonin starts to rise and you get, you're getting ready for bed. So I would try to do away with that. Go to sleep when your body tells you to go to sleep. Wake up without an alarm clock and just see where those times lie. And then as much as you can, try to abide by those hours, during the other days, better. But yeah, it's tough with school start times. And you mentioned, some schools trying to maybe allow for that diversity. It is very rare, but there are schools in Europe. And I'm curious about this one that you talked about having two shifts. But I know there's schools in Europe too that are kind of have a flex schedule where they have the core subjects in the middle of the day, and then students have the option to kind of come in a little later or come in earlier for electives. And then so the whole schedule is overall longer, and there's kind of shifts within that. So maybe, it's a very similar idea. Right. But that would help. Yeah, it help kind of even the playing field and allow students to hopefully perform better and feel better.
I love that. I don't know if you get this, Mark, too, but I get parents that complain about how late their teen is staying up. And I don't think they understand this circadian rhythm thing, or that there's this shift for their teenagers. And also they're like, oh, my kids are cramming. And so I guess the question then becomes, this is for the parents out there, is what is the impact of quote unquote cramming? And what would you say to parents that are complaining about their kids that go to bed late at night?
So you're suggesting they're studying and cramming for an exam late at night?
Yeah, or they're doing their work late at night.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm thinking back to my own high school years, and sometimes you had no choice because of schedules, right? And like sports, and they drift into the evening, and then it's when are you going to get around to doing your work? So it's tough, but as much as, anybody can have control over it. Yeah, the late night cramming, I mean, a student, that might be when their brain is online and they can study, but if they're up really late, it's true that it's not, if they're having to set the alarm for, 6:30 a.m. to get into school by 7:30 or something, they're likely cutting short, in particular, their REM sleep, which happens at the end of a night of sleep. And that REM sleep is what we need to consolidate learning. It's what we need to, help decision-making, impulse control, all these things that can be a struggle, especially during adolescence and as your brain's growing and changing during those years. So that, and just the learning itself, is going to be impacted by that, and obviously not going to help performance on the test that you were cramming for the night before. Right. So I think that is a strong consideration. And, it's just, I guess, a recognition of that and trying to see where in the family schedule, the school schedule, the activity schedule that, more time can be allotted for studying or flexibility, and trying to account for that. It's tough these days with all the stuff that needs to fit into 24 hours.
Yeah, Anna, the comments we get from parents are often, who designed this schedule for these kids, and it's basically they're going from the time they get up to the time they go to bed, and even when they're in bed. And so I think throughout your book, one of the things I put this lens of college kids and high school kids. Yeah. Students, excuse me. And when I identify, when I'm reading through it, I'm going, well, they're doing that wrong. They're doing that wrong. They're doing that wrong. And one of the common ones for high school students is they have, practice sometimes late at night, then they eat, then they study, and they're in front of a screen, and then they turn the screen off and they can't figure out why they can't go to sleep or sleep well. So I think
true.
That's
yes. I mean, all those things, right? As the science is showing, late night meals significantly impacts our sleep and our circadian rhythms, which carries over to the next day. But it's going to be a lot harder to fall asleep, and it's going to be a lot harder to get quality sleep if you eat before bed. If you exercise too late, that's also going to potentially impact your ability to sleep, as you're alluding to. And those screens in front of the face too. All those things can definitely exacerbate a student's already, a student who's already prone to wanting to be up later biologically. So all these, they're just, getting hit from all sides, as you suggested.
I guess for those students, because I don't know, again, I'll have students that'll be like, I'll sleep when I die, which I don't love that term. But what would you say to them in terms of helping them understand the long-term impact of these habits on their bodies?
Yeah, no, there's definitely the acute, immediate effects and the long-term risks associated with not sleeping and not sleeping at the right time. That is for sure. So, a lot of the long-term risk research is, emerging, relatively new, but there are strong links emerging about, not getting proper sleep and, longevity, about cognitive function across your lifetime, about earning potential, you name it. If your circadian rhythms are disrupted over a long period of time, there is suggested increased risks of cancer, of diabetes, of weight gain. If your metabolism is thrown off, again, thinking about those late night meals, if you eat late, your body is not ready to handle those incoming calories. And that could set you up for adding pounds and potentially, having your body become diabetic. So all these things are potentials as the time goes on, where you're going against your inner clocks.
So one of the things that every college student can talk about, having to do pull and all-nighter. Mm-hmm. And not only the disruption of sleep, but the negation of sleep entirely. So did you have a chance? You had the unique opportunity, I guess we'll call it an opportunity because you made it happen, of basically shutting yourself off of all external cues of days for 10 days in a missile silo. So you had a chance to experience, okay, what does my body regulate as normal? So let's say we have students, high school or college students, who completely throw their natural rhythm off by skipping a cycle. Are there ways that are best, or did you talk to anybody who has identified how to get back on schedule or make that impact? Like you say, long-term impact is nasty, but what about the short term? Can they minimize that?
Yeah, so that specifically, I can't give a prescription. I think the science would sort of suggest just, those one-off nights are not going to cause significant long-term harm, but it's important to try to not do those too often. And when they happen, just do everything you can that next day to try to tell your body day from night. So, get that light during the day, make sure, you're really disciplined that following night about avoiding light, avoiding late night meals, and going to bed at the right time, because you can't make up for that lost sleep. It's gone, and that's gonna, it's gonna affect your functioning probably for a few days after. And as you get older, I can attest to a longer period of time in which you're going to be messed up. I can't pull an all-nighter anymore, but I certainly did back in the day. And I think, trying to get your body back on, your body clock's back in sync, and getting sleep at the right time the following night. Because I think that some of the risk there is, trying to sleep during the day, your body's not really ready for that and not ready to get quality sleep during the day. And then if you get a lot of sleep during the day, it's going to make it hard to sleep that next night, and you can just kind of end up in this spiral. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to get a power nap, maybe in there especially depending on what you have to do that following day, but trying to kind of power through, get yourself those cues so your body still knows it's daytime. And then that next night, try to get a quality night of sleep and continue that to recover.
Yeah. I've done these 24-hour mountain bike races where you basically ride through 24 hours and you miss a sleep cycle, and your body's telling you this is the dumbest thing you've ever done. And it influences your body and your rhythm and everything for weeks afterwards. And
I
so
I find that, yeah.
I think students doing the same thing, studying and trying to focus, they're setting themselves up for what is probably not the best avenue towards success. We'll put
Absolutely. And I think on a smaller scale, just like those little, so not quite the all-nighters, but those late nights that we were talking about earlier, if you do those during the week and then, the weekend comes and it's like, time to catch up on sleep and sleep in on Saturday. I think we need to probably consider a little more strongly the impact of that whiplash on the body. Because I think there's I think sleeping in a little later on Saturday, probably helpful because especially if you haven't gotten much sleep during the week. But there's this thing called social jet lag, where it's kind of like traveling, on a Friday night and then traveling back on a Monday morning where you're shifting your sleep schedule so much that that's throwing off all your clocks, which is throwing off all those physiological functions of your clocks that we talked about earlier. And it's really not good for you. So the consistency of your sleep schedule, the science is building that is really important and perhaps equally, if not more important than how much you sleep.
I think some students, by the way, are going to hone in on that. You said they can take a power nap. So just clarification for those that want to take a power nap. How long should what should a power nap look like?
Right.
I mean, really, they should be short and they should be as early in the day as possible. I mean, assuming this is kind of, there's no, again, like black and white answer here. But on the whole, I try to keep my naps to under 20 minutes, which doesn't sound like much, but that's what the science suggests will not necessarily impede your sleep at night. And again, the earlier they are, the less they're likely to impede your sleep at night. Because you got these rhythms, but you also have this other system in our body that builds quote unquote sleep pressure. So that's also helping you. That's like building up throughout the day and helps you fall asleep at night at the right time, according to your rhythm. So if you sleep during the day, you're kind of, easing that pressure. And so you're going to have less of it at night. So it's a balance, right? I think, some people might be able to sleep a little longer and not have, as much of an impact at night, but I would suggest being careful.
Yeah. So what are some of those, if you are going to take a power nap, what are some of and even for going to sleep and even for waking up, you cover a lot of the little subtle cues. And when you were in the silo, you didn't have them. What are those little subtle cues that we may not be aware of that have a direct influence on not only our sleep, but how we sleep, when we get tired, or how to set up a power nap? What are the things that you could do that make the most out of that?
So it sounds like you're talking about kind of that sleep environment, the cues that point us to sleep. Yeah. So I cover a lot in the book. So what comes to mind immediately is really, fundamentally, it comes to trying to mimic the outdoors. So we evolved outdoors. We evolved with a changing intensity of light, changing wavelengths or colors of that light throughout the day. We evolved with changing temperatures. We evolved, to just eat during the day because that's when it was safe to be out and about and picking berries and hunting, eating, all the things that you just kind of imagine your long lost ancestors were doing. We still carry that biology for the most part. And so I think, at night, as I've learned to do from my research for the book, a few hours before bed, I am cutting all the overhead lights. I am trying to only use table lamps or candles with warm light that is not too intense. I am trying not to put a screen right in front of my face. I'll watch TV at a distance. That's not going to impact us that much, but it is also stimulating, which you need to consider. I might wear blue light blocking glasses if I have to be on a computer to try to keep those blue wavelengths of light, which tell the body it's daytime, away. I'll turn down the thermostat, trying to, cool. The studies show that a cooler temperature at night is going to help you sleep. And I'll stop eating, Again, I break these rules too sometimes because life happens and I want to have a social life. but trying to cut back on, trying to stop eating earlier. And then that also includes, drinks. It can include, whether it's wine or, anything that has calories, really. Alcohol is particularly bad, though, for sleep, regardless. So yeah, I think those are really kind of the low-hanging fruit of things to consider to really set yourself up for a successful night of sleep.
That's one of the things I think college kids, they don't realize if they're going to partake in alcohol, it actually, while they may feel relaxed, what it does to their sleep period is actually not a good thing. And they don't realize the long-term impact that all of those little subtle things that influence their sleep pattern, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I sure wasn't aware either. Yeah, I was always under the mindset that, a glass of wine relaxes me and helps me fall asleep. It might be sort of true, but the sleep is not quality. If you're like me, you probably wake up in the middle of the night, more often after alcohol. All those things are not great. Yeah.
That's so helpful. So on the topic of college kids, so I developed insomnia in college, and it's been a back and forth ride. I don't think people realize how hard it is to get rid of it once you have it. But what advice would you give to college students because there's no mom and dad there anymore to say, hey, go to bed, or hey, it's time to wake up. What advice would you give to them in terms of organizing their schedules so that, yes, they can be good to their bodies and themselves, but also still, quote unquote, have fun and be the college kid?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it starts with, at least for me, speaking from my own experience, I have to understand the why to be motivated to do things, make changes. So I think understanding this science, just paying more attention to how you feel, and even if you're a nerd like me, taking notes and writing like a little diary of like, okay, I did this at night. This is how I feel the next day. And this is when I'm feeling energetic, when I'm not. And just experimenting with that and trying to create a routine that matches. And I think that's the kind of thing that'll be more likely to stick when you really feel and understand the impacts that these small changes can make. And talking about it with your friends, because, maybe other people are not thinking about this and not realizing how much better they can feel and perform, whether that's in the classroom or in sports. And then if you have your social group on board, it's going to be a lot easier. Maybe, if you do partake in, going out or having drinks or whatever, you all agree to do it a little earlier. Happy hour prices. Right?
Yeah, happy hour pricing. Good call.
I'm in my 40s, and this is my current mission. I'm trying to get friends on board. So there's a balance to be had for sure. This does not mean to stop having fun and stop living, having a good, well-rounded college experience. But I think this can make all the experiences better.
That's one of the things I think, like you mentioned, we are the product of evolution, and that we have these internal clocks are all set way before we even got here. And one of the components of your book is when identifying one layer, say like the time the sun's going to come up at different times of day than it will at different times a year. And so if you set up routines that are set by a clock that doesn't follow those, you're out of sync already. So trying to find that best balance. But like you mentioned throughout the book, I think there are more mentions of establishing a routine is the best way that you can influence most of the layers of clocks in your body. But you still have to, like you say, you still have a social life. It's a social clock. And you still have an academic clock if you're a student. And you still have an internal clock that says you have to go to sleep. And I like the idea of you're building this pressure to go to sleep, the sleep pressure. But So what if you were to say to a student, hey, you're going to be influenced by lots of different aspects of time. If establishing a routine is the best thing you can do regarding sleep, you mentioned which kind of stop eating earlier, the light that you're conditioning yourself to. Are those things that a student should consciously know that's part of their routine, will that set them up for more success long term?
I think so. I mean, I think again, being cognizant of those things and just trying for a while to make those small tweaks that create that environment. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to recall like the dorm room environment, how much is really in your control, like temperature and all these things. Sure, it probably depends, but not worrying too much about having full control over all these things. It's just, tweak what you can within a realm of, a realistic realm there. And yeah, I think just those little changes can go a long way. There's no need to be perfect here. I think another thing I want to throw out that I talk about in the book is that really it starts in the morning. Like a good night's sleep starts in the morning, and you want a dark environment at night, but you want a bright environment during the day, especially in the morning. If you can get outside and get morning light within a couple hours of waking, that is actually going to really help you at night fall asleep. And it's also what I found really interesting is the science shows that protects you from some of the impacts of the light at night. So your body will withstand, seeing more blue light at night, that will be less impactful on your sleep if you've had a lot of light during the day. So I think thinking about it, all the way across the 24 hours is helpful as well.
So for some tools, you had mentioned SADD before and stuff like that. And there's definitely like certain times of the year where that daylight just seems to be very scarce. What tools or resources would you say for those kids that to get that daylight or to get more light in their lives when it might be a little harder to get natural light?
Yeah, I think you just have to try harder to get the natural light. So I think during the winter, particularly for me, even if it's cold outside, even if it's raining, force myself to get out, even if it's for 20 minutes. Because that light, while it looks dim maybe out the window, it's still orders of magnitude brighter than what you have indoors, most likely. So that's number one. And then number two is while you're indoors, in addition to trying to be close to a window, I'm very fortunate here in my office home that I have a big window, but supplementing your lighting with during the day with as many bright blue rich lights as you can. And you probably know they make lamps specific to help people with seasonal affective disorder. A lot of these quote unquote happy lamps are out there now. So yeah, supplementing with one of those, especially in the morning for maybe over your breakfast or while you're, doing some really last minute cramming for that test, that could be helpful as well. So I think there are tools out there. It's hard. I mean, again, we evolved at the equator where there was no changes in the light dark cycle. And those of us up at high latitudes, it's tough. I think there's no way around the fact that we're going against our biology to some extent, regardless of what we do. It's just trying to mitigate the damage.
Okay, so the converse of that, which is making the most of your day by including all the things that stimulate you and get you energized. Mm-hmm. The converse of that, of course, is how do you make the most of your sleep? And the reason why I asked this is I discovered earplugs later in life, and they completely changed my sleep. We went on a vacation to Europe, and I remember staying in a place in Italy that had stone walls that were who knows how many feet thick. And it was so dark and so quiet. I have never slept so good in my life. And so the earplugs now are just part of my routine, and I use them for studying. I use them for writing. I use them for sleep. So are there other things that you can use that might increase the quality of your sleep?
Yeah, I think the earplugs that's a great idea. It's a great one. Depending on where you live. Yeah, especially if you're in an urban area and there's noise or you've got a partner who makes noise. I think that, and then shutting out as much light as possible. So if you've got a street light outside your bedroom window, really trying to bolster up your curtain situation. So blackout curtains, And I mean, I have blackout curtains in my bedroom, and I still get a little bit of light that sneaks around them. I mean, I don't have like the super fancy ones that, cost a lot of money to really seal things off. So I have like plastic bags kind of draped over the top to try to keep the light from leaking around. So yeah, I think trying to create that atmosphere that you just described on your travels, where you just have a really dark, really quiet space. So doing whatever you can to replicate that is going to definitely be helpful to get that quality sleep. Yeah.
You can't cover your roommate in college and tell them, no noise.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, that's probably not, probably would not advise that.
Yeah.
Oh, and eye masks too.
Very good.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, because I was just going to say my niece is in college and she had a roommate her first year, and she's like, Anna, they game at like 2 or 3 a.m. and the lights are so bright and I don't know what to do. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, maybe hang a curtain between you and your roommate. But yours makes a lot more sense. An eye mask would have just done the trick. And I don't know why that's a great call out.
Yeah. I mean, some people don't tolerate it well because it's pressing on the face, but they make various like fancy ones now that have the hollow around the eyes. So you're not like pressing against the eyelashes. There's tools that can help, but man, yeah, that would be a tough one to deal with.
And talking of tools, I know that through your book, you mentioned some of the wearables and some of the devices. Do those work for identifying, say, like what your own circadian rhythm is, but also your chronotype? Are those actually used by people to identify those characteristics of their own rhythms?
I think to some extent they definitely can be useful and powerful in identifying your own. I mean, researchers are using them to track a lot of things, but personally, so I'll speak from my experience, I've been still wearing a Fitbit, and I have for a few years now been tracking my sleep. And for a while I was being more diligent about making notes, but looking at my own patterns, my bedtimes, again, my eating patterns, alcohol intake, those things, and then checking the data and seeing, the quality of my sleep, how many, the estimated minutes of REM. These things are not fully, perfectly accurate, but I think for trends to look at over time and seeing how those behavioral changes impact some of these variables has been really powerful for me. Kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, it's kind of once you, for me, see the data, correlate that with how I feel, how I perform, it's powerful motivator for change and behavioral change. So I think it's definitely can be a tool in that way, depending on, a person's particular motivators or how they learn or have flexibility in their lives to make those changes. But for me, it's been powerful to look at the trends of that data
over time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So our audience also includes students who have to travel for college or representatives that might have to travel for work. And so jet lag is a real thing as well. What advice do you have, I guess, in terms of people that have to sleep across different time zones and maybe those changes be more frequent?
Yeah, it's a challenging one, but I think similar tools can be used there where you ahead of a trip, depending on how many time zones you're crossing, you can try to, make slower adjustments leading up to it to be living on more the time zone you're headed to. And then once you get there, really trying to immediately get that input of the local light dark cycle. So, getting that bright light in the morning and eating according to, kind of the meal schedule of that destination, and doing everything to try to more quickly adapt to that. There are nuances here that I get into in the book, because depending on how many time zones you cross, some of these rules can actually come back and bite you, depending on when you expose yourself to light and our complicated physiology. But on the whole, that rule works. You can also leverage, melatonin supplements, but you have to be very careful about when you take those as well, which I talk about. So there's, again, there's layers of complexity, as we talked about earlier, But the science is making those layers at least more clear and helping us understand what to do with that knowledge. And I think there's some recipes that can make those transitions back and forth with the travels a lot easier. I also talk, this is kind of fun, but I talk in the book about, this is more futuristic, but possibly not too far into the future. We might have pills you can pop that will immediately change your internal rhythms, which is pretty fascinating. And other scientists are experimenting with some kind of wacky strategies like flashing light in the middle of the night that you don't perceive, at least consciously, that is also winding or unwinding your clocks. So there's some cool stuff in the works. So jet lag could be a thing of the past in the not too distant future. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, not that any of those things would have any influence on your on long-term impact of biology messing with those rhythms. No, that's
exactly. No,
what could possibly happen?
Yeah, there's definitely that.
I've had students who are from the West Coast who go to school on the East Coast, and I know more than a handful who have said that one of the worst things for them and their academics is coming home for any extended period, resetting to the local, like you say, the local time and the local light, and then going back. And especially if they have early classes, and it hurts. And they talk about, it's actually easier. They make their time at home less because they know it's going to have a greater influence if they stay longer on when they get back to school. So I've had students who have mentioned that flopping back and forth really influences some people more than others, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I'll say there, I don't know, maybe this kind of goes against what I was saying earlier, but maybe on those trips, depending on how long you're there, and maybe they've thought of this, but potentially try not to fully adapt to home time if you're going to be traveling back to school. Like, maybe delay looking at, or I'm trying to think if you're traveling west, maybe it's like, get up even earlier than the rest of your family and friends and try to get light, use a happy lamp or something to get light before the sun comes up locally on the West Coast here, just to try to keep a little more, synced with East Coast time, just to make that whiplash a little less. But if you're home for 3 weeks or for summer, that's probably not realistic.
And for those students in Hawaii, I just don't listen to them. They're having too good a weather, and I don't want to hear whining. No sympathy. None.
What are a few of the top takeaways that you think for our readers that are interested in your book? Like, what are some key reasons they should check it out?
Yeah, I think, again, my book gets into what's both the science, so deeper levels of the science to really understand what's happening in your body and why these things are so important. And my book's kind of broken up into 3 parts. Really get into the science. I get into, in the middle of the book, kind of the current situation in society with our schedules, with all these things that are influencing our inner clocks, some in our control, some out of our control. And then that pointing to what we can do as individuals and as a society to make changes that are going to make us healthier and more productive. So, and I think across there, really understanding foundation for this, what we can do. So those personal tactics, those tools, some of the tools we've talked about, I go into more detail on, as well as some others. And then really I find fascinating is thinking kind of going forward, how we can leverage this science again to prolong our lives, to make us more productive. And then thinking about, even the sustainability of our planet and the role of circadian rhythms in protecting other species, protecting our food system, thinking about, really, are we going to go to Mars? Like, there's a lot of implications there. So anybody who's, interested in that science or really wants to optimize their lives, I think there's something there for everybody.
And Lynne, you gave me a segue into a question that I've been wanting to ask you, but didn't know how it was going to work into the conversation. You and I both have talked to a number of astronauts. And one of the things, well, let's just say you said in the future, okay, we're going to have students who go to space.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what what are some of the crazy things? And I've had this conversation with a number of astronauts that mess with your sleep. So when we have future students going to space, what do they have to be aware of?
Yeah, you can be ahead of the game by thinking about, I'll give in the context of Mars, it's the wavelengths of light, again, that we're used to on Earth, the length of the day that we're used to on Earth. It's not the same anywhere else. We evolved on Earth. We didn't evolve with the day is longer on Mars. The light is red, the red is telling our body it's nighttime, or it's not telling us daytime here. And yeah, there's so many differences there, but in particular, yeah, if we think about circadian rhythms, the cues are not there to tell us the time of day versus night. So they could bring those happy lamps, I guess, and, the special glasses that give them the Earth's color and intensity of light. But yeah, obviously NASA, people are, they're starting to understand this a little better. So there are ways in which we might be able to leverage the science to try to manipulate our environment to be more.
They should definitely not sign up for a pre-8 o'clock class, right? No matter what planet, they should not sign. Okay.
But also if you're a really significant night owl, which means your inner clocks run longer than 24 hours. The day on Mars is 24 hours and about 40 minutes. So those extreme night owls might actually be Martians. So there's something. future reason to get an occupation on Mars. There you go.
But speaking of occupation, I hadn't thought about this before, but are there certain occupations, I'm guessing there are, I'm thinking of doctors, or other ones where it is more greatly affected or greatly affects their sleep schedule, and people should consider that when thinking about their future careers or majors?
100%. Yeah, I chapter 8, I get into a lot of this, but yeah, there's people you've probably heard about shift work and the dangers there to a person's health and circadian rhythms. So that is a strong consideration, is to know what you're getting into. In a lot of these professions, at least during your training days, you're likely going to be subjected to having to do shift work and doing night shifts. And you've already sampled a little bit of what that's like if you've pulled all-nighters or cram for tests. That's going to be a regular thing. And the science is showing that experiencing that for a prolonged period of time, especially in your younger years, could set you up for long-term health problems. So that's where science is pointing to some ways to help mitigate some of those harms, but there's no way around the fact that that is not what our bodies want. So keeping that in mind. But we need healthcare workers. We need people working around the clock. So it's noble, it's finding the balance here. There's also, if you're an extreme early bird or an extreme night owl, there are people out there whose genetics program them to be most alert, to be most productive through the hours of the night, and program them to want to sleep during the day. This is real. And I actually talked to a woman in the book who is one of those people, and she found a job where she's in the Midwest. She works from there, but she works with people in Australia, essentially. She's a veterinary pathologist. So she's looking at cases from snakes and other wildlife or pets in Australia. So she's able to work on, during the night. And she feels so much better doing that rather than trying to work against her clocks by, matching society's, daytime schedule. So I think there are options out there if you're, figure out your chronotype and know when you feel best, trying to match, career or job to that is possible.
So I have one last question, and I consider it the 800-pound gorilla in the room that we have not talked about.
Okay.
And that is because this is abused more by students, and more recently it has increased because it's available in so many different forms, and that's caffeine. Between Red Bull and all of the other energy drinks that are out there, they are using that to completely negate and ignore their sleep pressure, like you talked about. And they are artificially extending their day ruining their sleep period, and then they're doing it again the next day. So anything about long-term caffeine, any way in minimizing the influence, like drinking 5 gallons of water afterwards, or what are some of the things that you found in talking, and it definitely influences so many of the different layers of the different internal clocks. What did you find out about that, and what would you suggest students do to regulate that?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend, I don't mean cold turkey necessarily, but cutting back significantly, because you may not realize the vicious cycle it is getting you on. Because I've been there. Yeah, you don't sleep well the night before. You need more caffeine to get through the day. And then I got to test the next morning. I got to keep studying. I got to stay awake. You keep drinking the coffee, then you can't sleep. So it can definitely get you in this cycle. That's not helpful. And the science shows that caffeine stays in your body a really long time. It's in the book. I want to say the half-life of it. So it means like there's still half of the caffeine that you drank like 5 or 6 hours earlier is still there. And then, then it's a quarter is still there, another 5-6 hours later. So a cup of coffee after lunch is still likely going to be interfering with your ability to fall asleep at night, let alone a Red Bull, like while you're studying after dinner. Like that is going to impact your sleep. There's no way around that. So I think just, again, knowledge is power. I think knowing that and trying to break that cycle, and then realizing, okay, well, I don't need as much caffeine if I've actually slept. Great. And then you get on a positive feedback where, okay, you don't need as much caffeine because you slept, and then that doesn't get in the way of your sleep the next time you sleep even better. And I think giving yourself a chance to get on that pathway and seeing what your body can do without that input.
Yeah. We'll see how many listeners are actually able to grab hold of that bowl and wrestle it to the ground.
Right. Yeah. It's tough. Yep. It's tough, but it's doable if given the opportunity.
Agreed.
So how can people get a copy of your book or get in touch with you if they have more questions or want to learn more, Lynn?
Sure. Yeah. So The Inner Clock is available anywhere you buy your books. It's certainly on Amazon and other booksellers. And you can find me at lynnepeeples.com. That's LYNNEPEEPLES. And you can email me through there. And yeah, happy to answer any questions. And yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity. It's great to talk to you both.
Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to College Admissions with Mark and Anna, where we make getting into college easy and fun. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and subscribe to get updated each time we release a new episode. Also, for more helpful college admissions information, visit our website at www.collegeadmissionspodcast.com.